tons of options now, lots of changes, and I think almost all the changes are for the better. Hey guys, I'm Mark McKilley with Live Anabolic, and today I want to talk to you about the changes I've seen in the fitness industry over the last 20 years, really since I got into it, which was 1982. Wow, I've been doing this for 43 years. Not professionally for 43, but that's how long I've been lifting weights. And man, things have changed. Let's just start off with the mindset back then. So I was going to the University of Texas in Austin, Texas. That's the capital of Texas. There was one gym in the whole city outside of the university. Think about that, one gym for an entire city. Man, there's gyms on every street corner now. Back in those days, back in the 80s, even into the 90s, I would say, I mean, gyms weren't very prolific. And if you went to the gym, people didn't look down at you, but they thought maybe you were a little weird. Like, why do you go to the gym? Well, anyway, now it's the exact opposite. If you don't go to the gym and work out, people look at you a little weird, right? So what has changed? I'm going to talk about lots of different little categories here. Let's start off with the old machine versus free weights. Back in the day, and I would say the vast majority of people thought that free weights were better. You know, they said, well, you know, you got to use all these little stabilizer muscles to balance the weights and all that kind of thing. And that was kind of the thinking. And nowadays, I think it's completely flipped. I think the majority of experts, and that includes, you know, professional bodybuilders, primarily use machines over and above free weights. Now, they still use free weights for some exercises, but I would say they use machines 75 to 85% of the time. I would say that's probably about how often I use the machines versus free weights. And there's some reasons for that. So let's just talk about those real quick. Free weights, when you're using lightweight, no big deal. You're not worried about injury. You don't need a spotter. You can push yourself pretty hard. When you get near fatigue with a lightweight, whether it's dumbbells or barbell, you just put them down or just rack it. No big deal. But when you're getting serious, when you're getting stronger, when you're lifting heavier weights, when you're pushing yourself to failure, the last rep, can't do one more, now all of a sudden free weights are pretty dangerous, right? You're using heavier weight and you're struggling to get that last rep in, which is, you know, where a lot of the benefit, the muscle growth occurs. And man, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong, right? You know, you drop the dumbbells down. I've seen it happen all the time. Guys using real heavy, you know, 90, 100-pound dumbbells, trying to do bench press with them, you know, and they drop them and they bounce. Same thing when they can't get the barbell up and they're trying to bench press heavy weights, you know, and they're pushing themselves to exhaustion. They can't get it up. Now it's stuck on their chest or on their throat, and people have to run over there. So machines don't have that problem. That's one of the benefits of using machines over free weights. Now, if you got a spotter and all that kind of stuff, yeah, it's easy. You can do free weights safely and push yourself hard, but not that many people do that. So when you're on a machine, you can go as heavy as you want. Because when you hit exhaustion, you know, and you're doing a range of motion here, let's say, you go to here and the machine stops. It doesn't try to crush your chest or your throat or your face or whatever. And that's pretty much the case on every machine. So, you know, that's why so many people use machines nowadays. Now, on top of that, the design of the machines nowadays are much better from a physics standpoint. Back in the old days, you know, a bench press machine, let's say, it would have fixed handles and they would go straight up and straight down. Well, nowadays, most chest machines have handles, but as you go through the range of motion, you'll notice that your hands will come closer together and then widen as you go, you know, to maximum stretch. And pretty much every machine for every muscle group is designed that way. They're designed to give you maximum range of motion and follow your body's natural, I would say, movement mechanisms. It doesn't force your body, your hands, your shoulders, your legs to go into some kind of contrived way. And you'll notice it just by the way that the arms on all these machines are oriented. They're sticking out at these weird angles. And so when they rotate, they go out or they come in, just kind of depending on the machine. So, the people who build and design these machines nowadays have really come a long way from the old days where it was just about lifting a weight up and down, right? Now they understand the ergonomics and they understand the physics of your body's motion, and they do a really good job of designing these machines. So another thing I've seen, change over the decades, wow, it's been decades. I just turned 63 yesterday, by the way, is the realization nowadays how important rest days are. More so for us older guys, but still even for the young guys. Back in my day when I was in college and in my 20s and 30s, man, it was just like the more the better. At least that's what we thought, right? Work out 6 days a week, 7 days a week if possible. The more sets, the more volume, just knock out 30 sets of chest, that kind of stuff. Well, there's just tons and tons of studies out there that are easily accessible on the internet. And things have changed. Matter of fact, I was watching a guy, Chris Bumstead. He just won his 6th consecutive Mr. Olympia just recently. And I just heard him talking about kind of his workout split. He works out 3 days in a row and then takes a day off, total rest. And then he works out 3 days in a row and takes a day off. And the second 3 days, he doesn't hit the same muscle groups as he hit the first 3 days. So, that's, 1 out of every 4 days is a rest day. So 25% of days are not lifting weights. That's amazing. That's the guy that won the Mr. Olympia 6 consecutive times saying that. So anyway, there's just tons of scientific studies now that we didn't have back in the day. Golly, back in the day, it was just word of mouth and hearsay and just kind of, the bro science. And man, you can get on your phone now and learn more on your phone in 10 minutes than I did in the first, 20 years of lifting weights. It's just amazing. Another thing I think that's changed over the decades is back in the day, remember way back, cartoons. Remember the big, huge, muscular guys in the cartoons, and they had these little, tiny, skinny legs and that little waist? Well, nobody did leg day. Leg day just wasn't all that important. People might have done it occasionally, but nowadays, I think it's a great trend, and people say friends don't let friends skip leg day. And I think it's super important. Your legs are half of the muscle mass in your body. They're visually really important and impressive. I got a young buddy who's in the Marines, and his legs are just massive, and it makes him look way bigger than he really is, on the scale. I mean, it just kind of makes him look intimidating. His legs, his lower body is so big. Okay, another thing here I think that is way better now is our knowledge of nutrition and supplements. Just way more information. Tons and tons of studies out there that are pretty easy to access. Back in the old days when Arnold Schwarzenegger was working out. Remember the movie Pumping Iron? That came out in 1977. So if you've ever watched it or try to remember, and if you haven't, you ought to watch it. I think it's free on Netflix or Amazon. That was he started the whole weightlifting thing. He won the Mr. Olympia, 5 or 6 times. And in that movie, it was Mr. Olympia. That's the biggest bodybuilding event in the entire world. It was held in a high school gym. A high school auditorium. And they showed the spectators, maybe 200 people in the audience were watching that. and you look at Schwarzenegger, he was big and really impressive, but his body fat percentage, now I know you're going to say it looks incredibly low, but he is considered chubby and fat relative to today's bodybuilders. Even the amateur guys, that are not, crazy huge, that are doing these competitions have much lower body fat than Arnold did back in the day. And that's because of just, the knowledge we have when it comes to nutrition and supplements. We just know so much more about how much protein you need to eat and what supplements are good for you that can help with that little bit of extra, muscle growth and fat loss, and the timing of your protein intake throughout the day. And you got all kinds of cool diets like intermittent fasting and carb cycling. They didn't know anything about 20, 30 years ago, especially 50 years ago when Arnold was competing. So lots of improvement there. All right, getting near the end here, guys. The ironic thing about all this is we got gyms everywhere now. We got far better nutrition and supplements now, or at least knowledge of nutrition and supplements. But we're way less healthy now. Look, the obesity problem is skyrocketed, since the 70s and 80s. It's gotten much worse. All right. So that tells me, you have no excuse. All right. Back in the old days, they could have an excuse. Remember the old stupid food pyramid that the federal government told us, you need to prioritize grains and cereals and carbohydrates, eat lots of that and just eat a little bit of butter and meat. Stupid. It's completely the inverse now. Total opposite. So we know what we should be doing, but I guess it's just the proliferation of fast foods and all the processed carbs that you can buy at the grocery store that taste fantastic, that, just weren't as available, 40, 50 years ago. I don't know what it is, but I mean, 2/3 of the United States is overweight. A third is obese. And, we know exactly what, we should be eating and what we should be avoiding, but we don't. So I don't really get that. I've shot a ton of nutrition videos on this channel. So I urge you just to type in nutrition, in the search engine at the top of the page here, and it'll give you, probably 20 or 30 videos between myself and Gary to look at. But I don't know what's happened there. So that's a good news, bad news type of thing. Guys, there are just so many options now. You can work out at home with, equipment's really inexpensive to get off of Amazon for home, or they got these fantastic, really elaborate home gyms, with all these exercises kind of built into this one big jungle gym type of piece of equipment. Those are kind of expensive, but they're not cost prohibitive, maybe space prohibitive. But gym memberships are cheap. I mean, the gym I go to charges me $15 a month. So anyway, tons of options now, lots of changes, and I think almost all the changes are for the better. But guys, it isn't gonna work, it isn't gonna help knowing what I've told you today if you don't stick with it and never give up on yourself.